Okay, so let us start with three bows to the Buddha. You could do them mentally. One, two, three. And then we'll do the salutation one time. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, now I'm going to share the screen. And try it this way. Okay, so is the text visible?
No, Bhante. Text is not yet visible. Now it is. Now it is.
Okay, you see the sutta begins when the night had advanced.
Yes.
Yes.
Then when the night had advanced. Yes, Bhante.
Okay, great. Okay, so now we're continuing with our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses of the Buddha, and we're in the Book of Sevens. And as I said, I'm going to be sort of skipping through over a number of suttas, moving quickly through others in order that we can cover this material. I think we started the Anguttara Nikaya 2017, and we're still in it 8 years later, still a few more books to go. Okay, so this sutta is called Heedfulness. And there are a number of suttas that follow in that are very similar with just minor differences. And the suttas are speaking about the seven qualities that lead to the non-decline, non-deterioration, non-falling away of a bhikkhu, of a monk. But I think these qualities can also be considered applicable to really to any serious practitioner. And so we've come across parallel suttas to this in earlier books, like the fives and the sixes, where the Buddha mentions reverence for the teacher, and the teacher with a capital T. This is Satta. This is the Buddha himself. Reverence for the Dhamma, reverence for the Sangha, reverence for the training. So I'm not going to dwell on these because we've already dealt with those in earlier, when we we're dealing with the earlier books. But some of the additional factors are interesting. So we have reverence for concentration, and this is samadhi, which indicates that the Buddha here is giving special importance to samadhi, which is the concentrated state of mind achieved through, especially through samatha or calming meditation. But also there is samadhi that's achieved through vipassana or insight meditation. So I don't think that this statement sort of swings the needle in favor of those who argue on the insistence, who insist on the necessity for jhana to attain liberation. But what's important is the ability to train the mind in being able to focus one pointedly upon the object, whether it's an object of samatha meditation that leads to just the complete stillness and absorption in one object, or the focus of the mind on the ever-changing stream of experience, which is characteristic of what's called vipassana samadhi, the concentration achieved through insight meditation. And already we could say that samadhi is included within the training, but here is sort of pulled out maybe to give special emphasis to it. Then we have reverence for heedfulness, and this is the Pali word appamada, which also we could translate as diligence. So this is, we could say it's consistency and patient persistence in pursuing the training. So heedfulness really also goes along with the training, but this maybe entails a persistent even a determined dedication to the training. And to see the importance of heedfulness, you can look in the Dhammapada. The second chapter has a whole collection of verses about the importance of heedfulness or diligence. And the opening verse goes, Apamado. Okay, my memory recollection of the Pali is a little bit hazy, but it goes, heedfulness, yeah, Apamado amata padang. Heedfulness is the path to the deathless. Then its opposite, pamado pachuno padang. Heedlessness or negligence is the path to death. Those who are heedful never die. Of course, physically they're going to die, but they don't die spiritually. Whereas those who are heedless or negligent, even in this life, are already dead. Okay, so we could see the importance for heedfulness here. And then the last one is quite interesting that the Buddha brings this in. It's reverence for hospitality. Patisantava, I think, is the Pali word. And this indicates an important quality in monastic life, which we might sort of, people who are not familiar with monastic way of life might not be aware of, but you can see that the Buddha places stress on this quality of hospitality. And that means that in a monastery, if a monk comes visiting, that is a monk who's of good qualities, good reputation, one is supposed to provide right on the spot. One welcomes the visiting monk, provides a room, assuming a room is available. If all of the rooms are taken, sometimes they'll bring the visiting monk to the shrine room so he could just lay out a mat there and sleep in the shrine room. And when visiting, one would provide, if it's coming in the afternoon or the evening, provide a refreshing drink. Back in the old days, when monks would travel without shoes, when they arrive at the hall of the monastery, the younger monks might wash his feet with water and treat and pay respects. Typically, when a monk is expected, and this I found very interesting living in Sri Lanka, when I would make arrangements to visit a particular monastery, when I arrive in the room that's assigned to me, it will be laid out, even though I always bring along soap and toothpaste and toothbrush and a razor, but always is laid out on the table a towel, and on top of the towel, there'll be a new bar of soap still in the box, a new tube of toothpaste, new toothbrush, a razor, and maybe shaving cream, even though I already have those things, so I don't have to use them. But it's just a sign of hospitality. And then sometimes there are places where there's no hospitality. I remember the time I was doing a walking tour through part of Sri Lanka. I wanted to do a long walk extending over a couple of weeks. And so after walking like miles and miles one day in the late afternoon, I came into a temple and sat down in the hall, and the monks were in the other room. They saw me and they just were talking amongst themselves. They didn't even come out to greet me or to ask what I was doing or anything like that. So after waiting for about like 5 minutes while they were just talking and seeing me, but not coming out to greet me, I just got up and walked out and went to another place. I didn't put an X on the door of that temple saying, don't stop there in the future. Okay, so these are a set of 7 qualities that lead to non-decline. And remember, this is a deity is coming to the Buddha, and apparently this deity must be, perhaps he had been a monk in previous lives. I don't remember what the commentary says, but he's aware of these seven qualities, which the Buddha himself teaches. And so then the Buddha agrees with him, and then the deity pays homage and disappears. And then the next day, the Buddha reports this conversation. And so he endorses that statement from the deity. Yeah, the verses just repeat the same thing. Then we come to another sutta. Again, this is like a parallel where we have seven things that lead to the non-decline of a monk. And again, the first four are the same: reverence for the teacher, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the training. And again, we have reverence for samadhi or concentration. But now we have two other qualities brought in, two qualities that I've often spoken about as being sort of pairs or twins. Maybe not identical twins, because there's a difference between them, but they always go together. So when one is called hiri, the sense of moral shame, and this is that quality, that inner voice that restrains one from committing any kind of moral transgression, from what I would say a sense of one's own inherent dignity, that it's beneath one's dignity to engage in that type of unwholesome behavior, or that engaging in that kind of moral transgressions creates a stain on one's character. Maybe in Christian terms, we would say it's a stain on the soul. And its counterpart, moral dread, is the quality that restrains one from committing moral transgressions, from fear of the consequences. It could be fear from being blamed and criticized by others. If others find out, then they'll spread it about, and then you get a bad reputation. You know, okay. There are nowadays we have the tape recordings and uh, what will be email records that somebody might just spill out over the internet, and then your reputation collapses. So now there's AI can do so much damage. We have to be very, very careful of what comes out on AI. Like the other day, I mean, this has nothing to do with the topic, but just somehow when you open up the browser, there come these various news reports. And one was an image saying that Bob Dylan is lying on his deathbed in the hospital. And he's made sort of a last will and testament to his son, Jacob, to donate millions of dollars to some worthy cause. And I thought, wow, Bob Dylan is about to die. And one of my proud points, I saw Bob Dylan perform before anybody knew who Bob Dylan was, back in 1961, the late summer of 61, some months after he had just arrived in New York City, before he even released his first album. So I thought, he's about to die? Wow, that's terrible. And I didn't hear anything about this previously. So then, out of curiosity, I went to Google. Google is more omniscient than AI. I put in Bob Dylan, where is he now? I found out, I think Bob Dylan was giving a concert in Europe. Yeah, so don't trust what you see on AI. There was another thing that came. I don't know who Phil Collins. Does anybody know who Phil Collins is? He's a pop singer. Okay, so there was another one of these videos that came up with Paul McCartney. He was one of the Beatles, right? And Elton John was that Phil Collins was seriously ill, and Paul McCartney and Elton John Elton John, is it? Simultaneously came to visit him in the hospital, and they sang together, and then Phil Collins joined in, and they were all shedding sort of tears together. So I thought, wow, what a moving story. And then I looked at the comments, and somebody said, don't believe, somebody that I know said, don't believe it. This is AI. I didn't check up on it, but I'm probably true that it's just AI. So if you see an AI appears, Bhikkhu Bodhi caught smoking what? In the bathroom of Trump Tower or Mar-a-Lago. Okay, then you can realize that it's probably AI. Okay, sorry for the bad sense of humor. Okay, so this is moral shame, the inner voice of conscience that restrains one from transgression, and moral dread, the fear of the consequences, blame from others, fear of legal consequences, if you get arrested or penalized in some way. And even if you escape, the consequences are going to come. Okay, so again, this is the deity speaking, and then the Buddha approves, etc. Okay, now we come to 7 more qualities that lead to the non-decline of the bhikkhu, or we could say anybody in training, and who's so seriously engaged in the training. Again, the first 4 are the same, and then we have the reverence for concentration. So this is a consistent factor through all 3 of these suttas. And then we have 2 new ones, or 2 different ones. One is called, the quality is called sovachasata, which means being easy to correct. And let's see if I could type. Oh, it's not very cooperative today. Okay, I was just going to type the Pali word in. So the Pali word is based on suvacho, and vacho means word or speech, and su is good. So sometimes suvacho is mistranslated as being of good speech or of gentle speech. And we have this, I've seen in mistranslations, or I've seen this expression being mistranslated in the Metta Sutta. So to find it in the Metta Sutta, Santusakocha, Santusakocha Suvachocha, Santusakocha Suvachocha, Santuticha. To get any word in the Metta Sutta, I have to start from the beginning. Karaninga Takusalena, Suvacho Chasamudu Anatimani. So that's where it comes. Suvacho. So some translate it as being gentle in speech or good in speech, but that's not the real meaning. The real meaning is su is good and vacho is speech, but the sense is being easy to speak to in the sense of being easy to correct, being willing to accept advice and correction from others. And so when others, and this is important in monastic life, so usually the senior monks, especially the teacher or preceptor, will observe the behavior of the junior monks, particularly his own pupils. And if he sees that the pupil is doing something wrong, at the appropriate time, he'll call him in for a little chat and explain the faults and try to correct his behavior. And so this is sort of where we come to the fork in the road, where if the student is sort of obstinate and stubborn, he'll reject the good advice and say things like, what right do you have to correct me? You think you're perfect. I'm just as good as you are. I saw you doing this or that. Well, he'll just get angry and stamp out of the room. So that is being that's the opposite quality, which is do bacho or do vacho, being difficult to correct. So for development, for progress in the spiritual life, whether as a monastic or a layperson, you have to be willing to accept good, heartfelt advice from others, especially when people see your faults and they point out with a mind, when it's always supposed to do this with a mind of kindness and compassion, and to speak gently at the appropriate time to correct the faults of others. And so when your faults are being corrected, then you should be willing to look at the criticism objectively. It might be right, it might be wrong, but if it's valid criticism, then you say, yes, Bhante, yes, sir, thank you for correcting me. And then you try to correct your faults. So that's the way you develop and make progress. Whereas if you just remain stubborn and insistent on always doing things your own way, always being right and showing the others to be wrong, then you just get stuck in a kind of cul-de-sac, just in a box from which one can't emerge. So that's the Buddha really emphasizes this so much. And there are several suttas, I think, that come later in the Anguttara Nikaya, where there are monks who are, this is actually it comes in the Samyutta Nikaya in the chapter on Mahakassapa. I think it's chapter 16, if I remember correctly, where Mahakassapa is always complaining to the Buddha, saying, in the past, the monks were always soft, gentle, compliant, easy to correct. But nowadays, Bhante, Mahakassapa is saying to the Buddha, nowadays the Dhamma is coming to an end. When I try to correct the monks, they just reject my criticism. They just argue back with me and they become dubacho, difficult to correct. And then the Buddha says, so it is, Kassapa. Now is the time when the Dhamma is declining, coming to an end. So that's the way it was 2,500 years ago. What about today? Okay, so important whether one is monastic or even a layperson. If you're good Dhamma friends, point out your faults and correct you, doing so with a mind of trying to uplift you and help you, then you should be willing to accept their advice or at least consider it seriously. And then the seventh quality mentioned here is good friendship. This is having kalyana mittas. And we're going to come to elaborations on the quality of good friendship just below, so I won't elaborate on this now. Yeah, the verses just say the same thing. Oh, still the fourth one. What is the difference? Yeah, it seems, yeah, this is my opinion. It seems that these two suttas were originally one, which would have followed the pattern where first the deity makes the statement, then the Buddha reports the next day what the deity said last night. But somehow in the course of the oral transmission, they got broken up into two suttas. So it's really one, which is artificially divided. Oh, I see. I see why. Because now Sariputta elaborates. We don't need the elaboration. Yeah, because I want to go on to the next two suttas, which speak about the qualities of the good friend. So first, we're going to have the good friend, we call this in the general life. This could apply whether it's monastic life or lay life. In fact, this elaboration of some of the qualities of the good friend, we find these also in the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses of the Buddha, in Sutta number 31, where the Buddha is giving a long discourse to a young man named Sigalika. And one of the things he speaks about is the need to avoid bad friends and associate with good friends. And so we find some of these factors mentioned in the Buddha's advice to this young lay follower, Sigalika. And even though it's just stated very, very concisely here, but these are really like very, very beautiful elaboration of how you can determine who is your true friend, your truly dedicated friend. So he's one who gives what is hard to give. This is somebody who will share things with you and give you when you, especially when in time of need, they will give you something that they have that might be of value that they're willing to part from to help you. Or else they might give it as a gift just as a sign of friendship. They have something they cherish and they give it to you. And so it's hard for them to give, but to show their dedication to you, they give what is hard to give. And they do what is hard to do. Sometimes, like if you're ill, you have to go to the hospital, you need a ride, they'll drive you to the hospital. When you're staying in the hospital, they'll bring you some maybe extra, some refreshments, prepare meals for you if the hospital doesn't offer meals. Um, when you come back home, they'll take care of you. If you're unable to look after yourself, they'll do what's hard to do. And they'll patiently endure what is hard to endure. In a way, this is a little bit like an elaboration of doing what is hard to do. Sometimes they have to undergo a lot of difficulties and hardships for your case, uh, for your sake. Sometimes maybe an example, maybe other people are criticizing you, slandering you, blaming you, and then they will come forward and stand up for you and defend you and argue in support of you. And then other people, those people who have been criticizing your friend, they will start criticizing you and blaming you and even maybe physically harming you, but you're willing to endure that verbal abuse or even physical abuse in order to stand up for your friend. So that's a mark of a true friend. Okay. And then he's one who reveals his secrets to you. So this is a mark of trust, because sometimes people have things weighing on their mind, past experiences, or things that they want to confess about their own shortcomings and faults, or inner problems that they might have. like sometimes in monastic life, somebody will be troubled. Let's say, I mean, to be very frank, sometimes a monk is troubled by excessive sexual desire. And so they'll come and say that I have this problem. I don't know how to deal with it. Can you give me some advice? So that's taken as like some kind of confidential information. Or sometimes it will be that, that the monk has a grudge or feels a conflict with another monk in the monastery and doesn't know how to deal with his resentment towards that other monk. And he'll come and reveal that secret. And you don't want to start spilling the secret, but rather you take those confessions in confidence and you do your best to help your friend, but you don't go around telling others about what has been told to you in confidence. So it's very impressive that the Buddha, recognizes all of these subtle marks of good friendship. So he reveals his secrets to you. And then the true friend is also one who preserves your secrets. So when you discuss your own problems with that person, you reveal your weaknesses and maybe you reveal your hangups, your conflicts, your difficulties, could be even financial difficulties. Then he'll advise you to the best of his ability, but he preserves your secrets. You've trusted him or her, and that person who's a true friend will keep the secrets and not speak about them to others. And if somebody does start chattering to others about the things you confide to them, and you realize that other people have no other way to know but through that person, then you could realize that this person is not a real friend. And then the sixth factor, he doesn't forsake you when you are in trouble. In a way, this is a little bit similar to patiently enduring what is hard to endure. But let us say you're in trouble financially, or maybe others are rejecting you, criticizing you, abandoning you, either on false charges or could even be for things that are genuine faults on your part that others are rejecting you. But this true friend will remain true in his friendship, even though he might have to criticize you and help you to emerge from your faults. And then the seventh, yeah, I'm not so sure about the translation that I use. I had, of course, there's a word kinena, which I mentioned in the note, which can have two meanings. Kina is when things are exhausted, which means that when you've exhausted all your wealth, he doesn't despise you. But kina, there's another word kina, which can mean rough or harsh. So I took it in that sense. He doesn't roughly despise you. Yeah, so the note just explains the two meanings. But in a way, this seventh factor almost seems superfluous, since if the friend is one who doesn't forsake you when you're in trouble, then certainly he's not going to despise you. And then I had in my, excuse me, in my notes, I took the longer passage. Let's get rid of this co-pilot. This is that longer passage from the Sigalika Sutta. Is it visible?
Yes, Bhante.
Yes, Bhante, we can
Friendship.
see it.
Yeah, so it's a long passage in the Sigalika Sutta, Dika Nikaya number 31, where the Buddha speaks about foes or enemies in the guise of friends. And then excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Okay, he's one who appropriates the friend's possessions, who renders lip service, the one who flatters, the one who brings ruin. And then he elaborates in each of these. Wait. Yeah, he elaborates each of these. I'm not going to go in the elaboration, but we just go through quickly to show that this one is interesting. So one who brings ruin should be who is the foe in the guise of a friend, the companion who goes along with you in indulging in intoxicants, the companion who hangs out in the streets at unseemly hours, the companion in frequenting theatrical shows. These would be kind of lewd shows. I don't think it would include Shakespearean dramas or good theater, but sort of just like burlesque shows and so on. And the companion in gambling. And then we have the four genuine friends, the helper, the one who remains the same in happiness and sorrow, the one who gives good counsel, the one who sympathizes, and so on. This goes on as quite a long passage, so we're not going to go into all of them. Okay, so this is what I call the general friend. The friend, I actually distinguish two types of friends, or two types of kalyanamita, two types of good friends. Borrowing a term, I think it was the British monk Sangharakshita who made this distinction, the horizontal good friendship and vertical good friendship. Horizontal good friendship is good friendship between those who are roughly at the same level of you. These would be like your fellow Dharma practitioners, or those in your own circle. And then the vertical good friendship is the good friendship between the teacher or spiritual guide and or the mentor and the student or pupil. And so it seems that the first sutta here deals with horizontal good friendship, a good friendship between those who are peers, roughly at the same level. And then here the Buddha is speaking about the bhikkhu friend. And so this would be probably can be taken as the good friend in the vertical sense, the one that one looks to as a guide, mentor, or teacher. And so here the Buddha says that one should associate with the monastic friend who possesses 7 qualities. One should resort to him and attend on him, even if he dismisses you. So what are these 7? Okay, so the first seems very broad, that he's pleasing and agreeable. So one doesn't want to associate with somebody who is sort of rough, displeasing, seemingly disagreeable in his manner. So sometimes I have to say, you have to make some qualifications. Sometimes there'll be some spiritual teachers who seem to be disagreeable and rough in their character, but they really have a heart of kindness and compassion and want to help you. But the manner is just rough. So I think I've never met him personally, but there was a Thai meditation master, Achan Mahabor, who is known to be like very severe, I think is the word. harsh and severe. He was one of the teachers, the disciples of Achan Mun, the great master of the early 20th century. And yet Achan Mahabor, was not the type with the bright, smiley face. He would always have this kind of rough expression on his face, always be looking for the faults in his students, criticizing them harshly. Even sometimes if the student was like this is what I heard, like mopping the floor, he'll come up to him and say, "You're mopping it wrongly." And sometimes he'll pull up a student in front of the group and criticize them and scold them in order to sort of embarrass them in front of the group. But even though he's not pleasing and agreeable in the manner, but it's done with good intentions. I have to say confidently that I'm not attracted to that type of teacher. I like the soft and gentle and kind who are pleasing and agreeable in their manner. Okay, then the person should be respected and esteemed. These almost like synonyms. But again, you don't judge somebody as being worthy of associating with just because they're respected and esteemed, because sometimes somebody can receive a lot of respect and esteem, even though they're quite corrupt inside. In fact, sadly, I don't know if you follow news about developments in monasteries, but you read sometimes every once in a while that there's a monk who might be head of a major monastic establishment, for decades been respected, esteemed. Everybody thinks he's very worthy, venerable, even holy, thinking he might be even at least a stream enter a arahat. And then things come out, and then the reputation collapses. I remember decades ago, there was a monk from Thailand who was, I think, living in Australia, and everybody praised him as being the new Achan Mun. Achan Mun was the early 20th century Thai monk, widely regarded as an arhat. And this monk was supposedly following in the footsteps of Achan Mun, very, very, in appearance, very austere, like even in Australia, walking barefoot, going on alms round, very strict, apparently, in his observance of the Vinaya, didn't handle money, though he had a credit card. It turned out to be his downfall because somehow the report came back to the holders of the credit card that the credit card was being used at what they used to call a house of ill repute, which means a place of a brothel. So once they found out what the credit card was being used for, then his reputation collapsed. Yeah, so don't always just judge by one who is respected and esteemed, but one has to, as the Buddha says, associate with the person for a long time and use wise judgment. Okay, the next one, it's a little obscure in the Pali. The word vata means one who is a speaker. So I think I had the note from the commentary here. Yeah, the commentary only says one who is skillful in speech. And so I just presume that the meaning is one who gives good advice. And then this is a sign of somebody who possesses strong moral integrity, that he patiently endures being spoken to. That is, when others criticize this person, that they don't flare up and become angry, upset, resentful, and start arguing back, but they're able to patiently endure criticism. even sometimes the criticism might be un, unwarranted. Like there's a famous story comes out of I think, yes, this must be from the Japanese Zen tradition. There was a Japanese Zen master by the name of Hakuin who was living in a remote hermitage, which was near a seaside, near the seaside. And there was a young girl from this, in one of from a fishing family, and she got pregnant. And then her parents saw that she got pregnant, and everybody in the neighborhood saw she was pregnant, and they were all criticizing her, and they wanted to know who is the father, who is the father, and she didn't want to blame her boyfriend, and so she pointed up to the hermitage from the hilltop and said, "It's the monk Hakuin." And so then, when the baby was born, all of the people took the baby and brought it to Hakuin and said, "This is your baby. You take care of it." And Hakuin just said, "Is that so? Is that so?" And then he took the baby. Of course, as a monk, he wouldn't know how to bring up a baby. He just did his best. I guess maybe some of his supporters, he asked for milk for the baby, or maybe he got a young woman among his supporters to look after the baby. But finally, after a few days, the girl relented and broke down in tears. And then she confessed, no, it was not Hakuin, but it was the young fisherman living a few houses away. And so then the parents and the family came up to the hermitage and came to Hakuin and said, "Our daughter has confessed. You're not the father of the baby. Give us the baby back. It's the fisherman who will now marry her." And so then Hakuin gave the baby back and just said, "Is that so? Is that so?" Okay, so he patiently endures criticism without getting upset. Yeah, there's another beautiful example of this later in the Anguttara Nikaya. This is Sariputta is the victim. There was a monk who had some resentment against Sariputta, and then he came to the Buddha and he criticized Sariputta rather harshly. And the Buddha, of course, would not accept the word of that monk. And he called Sariputta up to him and he said, "Sariputta, this monk is criticizing you on such and such a grounds." And Sariputta didn't reject the criticism, but he just said that I am one who behaves just like a boy, like a bull whose horns have been cut, who doesn't harm anybody. So I'm not capable of harming anybody. And after Sariputta made that very eloquent statement, which is called a lion's roar, the monk who criticized him broke down and confessed that all of his criticism was just false calumny, false accusations, and he begged Sariputta for forgiveness. So he endures being spoken to. He gives deep talks. This will be deep talks on the Dhamma. And then the seventh seems almost, yeah, almost unnecessary, but he doesn't instruct you to do anything wrong. Okay, so let us see if we have any questions. Let me try to move this. Okay, so if you have questions, let me find the participant list. So the way to ask the questions is to use the hand symbol. But I have to also, sometimes I'm always looking at the screen and I forget that there are people in the library. So if I'm going to give priority to the people who are here in person. If anybody has a question, then please raise a real hand. Okay, so Jeff is the name? Yeah, I think it's good we have another microphone. And then I'll repeat the question so the people on the online can.
When the deity comes to the world, does the text specify what kind of deity is it?
What time of day?
No, what kind of deity? What kind of deity?
What kind of deity? Okay, yeah. So the question is, when these deities come to the Buddha, what kind of deities are they? You know, the text never really specifies what kind they are. So if we want to take this literally, I would say that these are probably what they call earth-dwelling deities, rather than deities coming from the heavenly world. Though I think if I remember the background story to the Mangala Sutta, I think that might have been deities coming from the Tavatimsa world. Yeah, so I don't really know. And it could be that this is just a literary device used to frame the content of the sutta. Yeah. Okay, anybody else in the. Okay, please take the microphone.
This question is about land declines of the Sankha.
It's about the.
Land declines of the Sankha.
Yeah.
Right? We start about that conversation. But later on, there's the qualities of the hands.
Yeah.
So is there any relationship with the land declines of the Bhikkhu?
I see. So the question is whether there's any relationship between those qualities that lead to the non-decline of the bhikkhu, of the monk, and then the suttas that deal with the qualities of the good friend. It could be, in the Anguttara Nikaya, we often find that the topic of a sutta the suttas will jump from one topic to another. Often just what holds them together is just the number of items in the sutta. But in this case, we remember that the last of the suttas on the qualities that lead to non-decline of the monk is good friendship. So it could be that for the compilers of the text, that was the cue or the reason that led them to put the suttas on good friendship after the sutta on the non-decline of a monk through good friendship. But this is just speculation on my part. Okay, so now we can take Doran, and again, you unmute.
Thank you, Bhante. So much fun to go through these. I remember hearing a Dhamma talk, don't remember by whom, maybe Ajahn Chah, maybe Thich Nhat Hanh, more likely Thich Nhat Hanh, who was saying talking about a slightly different definition of Kalyana Mitta. I'm assuming all these suttas are Kalyana Mitta. And that was someone who, and that would be also both vertical and horizontal, I think it would fit.
Yeah.
And someone who guides you in wisdom, to wisdom, and encourages you in wholesome qualities, and helps you stay on track if your practice fails, things like that. Does that make sense for Kalyana Mitta?
Yeah, of course. That is definitely the quality of the Kalyana Mitta.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, I think, didn't we find them? Let me just take a quick look. Well, here in this sutta, it's only phrased in a negative way, one who doesn't enjoin one or instruct one to do what is wrong. But I think in that longer sutta of the Digha Nikaya, I'm sure you'll find in 4 ways, you can understand who is a genuine friend. He restrains you from doing evil. Then he encourages you to do good. Again, he gives good counsel. Yeah, but, certainly, yeah, that would apply the mark of the Kalyana Mitta.
And that was 31. You said Digha Nikaya 31 that has the long one?
Yeah, it has that long elaboration on the contrast between the enemy in the guise of the friend and the person who is the true friend.
Thank you.
Okay, then we come next to Gita. Can unmute.
Thank you so much, Bhante. What an important sutta. It's a huge help to us lay people. Thank you, Bhante. You are fantastic. And with my head at your feet, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Much merits, Bhante. Bhante, this is so important in life because we meet people all the time.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to see who is a horizontal good friend because a lot of people, they tend to put on a facade. So externally, they pretend there's something, but internally, it takes many years to discover if they're really pure at heart. So I think, I don't know, I think there's a sutta that Buddha preached. If you can't find a proper friend, it's best to practice alone.
Yeah.
Right, Bhante? Because they could lead you right to hell. So you have to be extremely careful. In the vertical friendship, I agree, Bhante. There are great bhikkhus like yourself, Bhante, that are fantastic Kalyana Mittas who teach the Dharma so we can advance and progress in the path to the Aryan lineage. So I think this is a very important sutta, and thank you, Bhante, for teaching it. And I just wanted you to speak a few words on what Buddhajanan Mahanse has said to us about, don't associate with the wrong friends, to be very careful, because it takes years of finding out who someone is. They could be even related to you. You never know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but it doesn't always take years. I mean, if that case, so it could be that somebody who has been a good friend for years, something happens to them and they change and they get corrupted. And
That's
that
true,
would
Bhante.
friendship. But generally, I'd say it doesn't really take years, but sometimes you could get a sense of somebody over several weeks who's a good friend. But there's a sutta really that deals with the same theme. It's in the Anguttara Nikaya Book of Fours. Now, my memory is not for numbers, it's not as good as it used to be, but it says that oh, how bad my memory is getting. It says that it deals with four things: a person's integrity, honesty, wisdom, and constancy, or something like that. And then it says that you don't come to a judgment about them quickly, but only by associating with them over a long time and only by examining them wisely, not
That's right.
rashly.
That's the sutta I was thinking about. Yes.
Yeah. But that
Thank
is,
you, Bhante.
there's a sutta, it's actually a verse in the Dhammapada that says that, also in the Sutta Nipata, if you find a good friend, then you should travel along with them, rejoicing in the friendship. But if you fail to find a good friend, then you should walk alone like the horn of the rhinoceros.
That's it, Bhante. Thank you for
Okay.
sharing that.
Okay, we could take now Nina Laboy. Again, you unmute.
Yes, thank you, Bhante. I'm just, the question I have is, would you consider these friendship qualities under or more of an elaboration of right conduct?
I wouldn't put them under right conduct. I think just you take a good friendship as a sort of a heading in itself. And then we just take these as elaborations of good friendship.
I see.
Or you could say that one expects the person one chooses as a good friend to embody right conduct in their behavior. And to the extent that you take them as a guide or mentor, you expect them to encourage you in right conduct. Yeah, that we could say.
Yes. Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see other. Okay, we'll take one more. I just saw one hand go up, so just take one more question, then we'll have to end. So this is Deborah. Again, you unmute.
Yes, thank you, Bhante. I'm wondering in this discussion where compassion comes in for um, the friend who might want to lead us astray, and where our own will, protection of our goodness comes in. So I can't blame maybe a poor friend who leads me astray without also blaming myself. Where am I responsible for my karma? And where do I start the compassion for a friend who is struggling on the path?
Okay, this is, if I understand the question, is say you have a friend who is like going astray and maybe even trying to lead you astray. Do you try to correct them out of compassion or abandon them? Is that the point? Okay, so
and also blame the responsibility.
yeah, I think I have to be very
I
brief
have
because
to
my
think
time is.
longer. Yeah,
It's sort of like I'm on a
that's fine.
television program and there's an end point where before the next program comes in. So I have to be brief. Yeah. So of course, if you have a trusting relationship with the person and you see that they're going astray in some way, then out of kindness and compassion, you try to correct them and even persist in trying to correct them, even if they are resistant, even if they argue back, even if they reject you, still out of your concern, compassionate concern for them, you try to help them and uplift them. But then there comes a time when if they continue to resist your advice, reject your advice, and persist in their unwholesome ways, then there comes a time where even the Buddha says you just have to look on with equanimity and just let them take responsibility for their own conduct. You've done your best. It didn't work. Now you have to, just maintain your own inner equanimity and not get pulled down by them. Okay, we're going to have to come to an end now. And so we're going to end with the sharing of the merits. And so I'll recite the verses for sharing the merit with the deities, probably the earth-dwelling deities, and then with the Bhutas, the fair spirits, and then the Nagas, the dragon spirits, and with all beings. Akasa ta chabuma ta deva naga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirangra kantu sasanam akasa ta chabuma ta deva naga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirangra kantu desanam akasa ta chabuma ta deva naga mahidika punyanta manumoditva chirangra kantu mang parang. dukkha patacha nidukkha baya patacha nibaya soka patacha nisoka antu sabbe pipanino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. And then we say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu.
And then
And a bow to Bhante Bodhi. Thank you, Bhante Bodhi.
wait, not yet to bow to Bhante.
Okay, Bhante.
First we do 3 bows to the Buddha.
The Buddha.
But just, this is the way the mind works strangely. As I was reciting Akasata, the number flashed into my mind, 193. So I think that sutta about the way the Buddha says about the 4 ways in which you judge a person, but you have to judge them over a long time and use wisdom. It might be Anguttara Nikaya Book of Fours, number 193, 191 or 193. So you look at there.
Thank you, Bhante.
Maybe I was reciting Akasa Ta Chabuma Ta, so it might have been one of those little devas that put the number 193 in my mind. There could be 993 or 193, or 91 or 191. Okay, so we'll do 3 bows to the Buddha. Okay.
Bow to Bhante.
Bow to Bhante Bodhi. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Bhante. Have a good lunch.
Okay.
Have a great lunch.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bhante.
Bhante. Good to see you,
Everybody
Bhante.
join
Be
me.
well, Bhante. Take care of your
Sadhu,
health.
Bhante.
See everyone.
Namo Buddhaya.